Joining us now is Enrique Esparza, CEO of Co-Production International. Welcome to the show, Enrique.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, obviously, you're one of those guys who spend a tremendous amount of time, and I seem to use that word a lot, but a tremendous amount of time teaching people to be a lot more efficient and understanding the efficiency of global production. Talk to us a little bit about co-production and also give us some background on how you came up with these ideas and how the company got started.
Absolutely. So we are a family-owned business. We are based out of San Diego. The company was started back in 1978 with a very basic idea of supporting U.S. manufacturing entities that were looking for expansion opportunities south of the border. And in essence, that's what we do. We're known in the industry as a shelter operator, and what that means is my U.S.-based company will contract directly with U.S. manufacturers. We then turn around and find them the building. We do all of the administrative legwork, if you will, all of the accounting, all of the logistics, payroll processing, permitting. From an administrative standpoint, we're the ones operating the facility. From a production standpoint, the client provides the capital equipment, the technical know-how, and, of course, the raw material. So it's a very good blend, a very good partnership, if you will, to create efficiencies in timing and production, learning curve, of course. And everything is being done through our Mexican entity. The U.S. manufacturing company does not have a legal or fiscal presence in Mexico. And our program is flexible enough that it allows companies to start under the shelter program and then eventually wean off of our program, migrate into their own entity, which, of course, we support them on. And then even in some cases, we even go as far as doing outsourced admin services for those same clients. We have a variety of clients. We have aerospace companies, medical companies, industrial. I mean, in our lifespan, we've seen probably 220, 225 companies that we've set up along the border region, primarily in the Tijuana area, San Diego, Tijuana area, and again, just a variety of different industries. Yeah. So that's in a very brief summary. That's what we do. We are very much about creating opportunities on both sides of the border. I myself am from Tijuana. I was raised on both sides of the border. I'm very much aware of the needs of and the people and the culture on both sides. So we really try to, we're very sensitive to the issue of jobs and labor on both sides of the border. Yeah, and so what we try to do is we work with companies that are not necessarily looking to relocate their facilities from the U.S. to Mexico, more so companies that are having challenges in expanding their manufacturing footprint wherever they may be at, whether it's California or Chicago or the Midwest or whatever. And so in that sense, you know, we want to make sure that we're not taking away from anyone or anything, and they're just leveraging the opportunities that the region presents for itself.
Enrique, you don't know this, but I actually used to live in San Diego, so I'm familiar with your hometown there for the most part.
Yep.
Lived there for years. Exactly. Actually, spent a lot of time in Coronado and the I guess Cabrillo National Monument, the Wild Animal Park. I mean, take your pick. Take your pick. Yeah, I am just showing off. So, but you know, what's interesting about what you mentioned about Tijuana and both sides of the border, I've seen both of those in person. When you think about companies that are trying to do what you're telling them what they want to do, how important is it to have a partner like you that can coordinate those things in a much more in an efficient manner and get things up and running quickly?
It's extremely important. I mean, we've been doing it for 40 years, so it's not only the know-how, it's the know-who, and that applies to both sides of the border. So what we see in efficiencies in production is that a company that goes independent, if you will, and does it on their own, it may take them as many as 3 years to reach the level of efficiency in production and other areas that we can reach within 1 year. And so that's where our expertise comes into play. And then, of course, they're not burdened with the administrative functions of operating a facility south of the border. Their focus is solely on the production side. We don't get involved on the production end of things, and so that makes it that much less complex. Of course, I'm not going to say it's easy because nothing is that simple. But we're the ones that are mitigating the risks for ourselves, in essence, because again, they don't have a Mexican entity that they're operating. We are their Mexican entity down there, and so it just makes it less complex and much more efficient in every aspect.
Now, you mentioned the fact that you had they actually don't have a Mexican entity there. Are you acting as a third-party manufacturer for them, or are you essentially creating what amounts to a business incubator that they later can acquire, which is something you mentioned also?
Exactly. We are the type of entity that is very flexible. So we're not cookie cutter, and each of our contracts with our clients is very, I'm not going to say very different, but it's tailor made to their specific needs. So we have companies that are very comfortable staying under our Mexican entity and operating under our Mexican entity for years. And then we have companies that come in and say, you know what, in 3 years I want to be independent of your services. Perfect. So we accommodate for both of those scenarios, and we support them in that process. We have clients that have been with us for 11 years, and we have clients that we know are going to be out the door in 3 years. And what we do a little bit differently is we actually prepare and assign an administrative team to the accounts that we know are going to go independent, and we prep that admin team so that when we're out of the picture, so to speak, they can take on the challenges and they can run the business, essentially like us. The U.S. manufacturer, then becomes the owner of the Mexican entity that we've set up for them, and everybody's happy. If they have challenges in the future, whether it's a logistics situation, an accounting situation, we're there to provide support for them every step of the way.
Enrique, on the other side, we're going to take a break in just a second, but on the other side of that break, we're going to talk about what that shelter program means in protecting that company, in addition to the new things we may be seeing with regard to NAFTA and how they may affect those entities and how you guys can help mitigate part of that risk. So we'll talk about on the other side of this break. Hang tight.
Absolutely.
We'll be right back. Once again, this is Ed Baxter talking to Enrique Esparza, CEO of Co-Production International. We'll be right back. Welcome back to CEO Money. It's Ed Baxter sitting in for Michael Yorba. We're talking to Enrique Esparza, CEO of Co-Production International. Enrique, where we left off, we were talking about the importance of having that shelter program and you guys basically bracketing the risk associated with companies that use your services. Kind of dig into that, give us some color about how important it is to have that bracketed protection.
I think at the inception it's critical. Again, it allows the manufacturing client to focus on his expertise. We're the ones that are taking the risk insofar as the employees, insofar as all of the legal fiscal obligations that it takes to operate a Mexican entity. And in that sense, it's not so much that there's a risk in doing that. It's just the learning curve of having a new player, so to speak, especially a foreign entity coming in. And instead of having to hire the attorney and the accountant and all the ancillary services that are required to set up an entity, we're doing all that for them. And at the same time, we're operating the facility. So it really just allows them to focus in on production. It gives them an arm's length distance, if you will, from the facility. Of course, all the responsibilities for the employees are on us. And then our contract, of course, addresses what their obligations are, how they should be operating in Mexico, the protocols, the pros and cons, if you will, of how to do business south of the border. So we prep them for that every step of the way.
Well, obviously, a couple of questions come up in a scenario like that because you have NAFTA to deal with, you have other scenarios like that. But what level of pass-through liability do you guys totally eliminate or control when it comes to that? Because you are operating the facility on their behalf, but it's still their product. Is there any? Are they fully insulated, partially insulated, or talk to us a little bit about that?
They are fully insulated. The only time that they come into play is when we sign the lease agreement. So when we go out and we sign a lease agreement on their behalf, of course, it's our Mexican entity, but we're signing a 100,000 square foot building, for example. A 100,000 square foot building. The industrial park, and this is across the border, most industrial parks are pretty savvy about this nowadays. They will require a U.S. guarantor.
Yes, they do.
They know that we are, because they know that we are the shelter and they know that we are, the Mexican entity. If for some reason the operation goes south and the manufacturer decides to pull out of Mexico, we're the ones that are left holding the bag, so to speak, with the legal liability and the fiscal responsibility. So the industrial park says to us, hey, guys, we want to make sure that we have security from the U.S. entity that is actually manufacturing their goods here in Mexico. So that's the only time that the U.S. entity engages with anything south of the border. That's been standard practice now for probably 15 years, if not longer. And that's about it. Other than that, again, the employees are ours, the the anything that happens inside of the facility is our responsibility, our obligation. God forbid that there were something significant, some type of I don't know, some incident of a significant nature. Again, that responsibility falls on us. We, every step of the way, are making sure that the materials we're receiving, the production processes, of course, are compliant with Mexican standards, Mexican labor laws, et cetera. So in some cases, people assume that because you're operating in Mexico, you may have more lax systems across the board.
I doubt
and that's really not the case.
No, it's not the
really
case.
Not the case. EH&S has been just as vigilant, as strict as anything on the U.S. side of the border. The only benefit that we see when it comes to EH&S, for example, is that we deal with maybe 2 or 3 entities at most, whereas, for example, California has, I don't know.
Well, remember, Enrique, it is California. I mean, as an alphabet soup of regulation in California, having lived there, and in the times when I wasn't probably somewhere near Black's Beach, it was always a lot of fun. I know there's a hidden meaning in there for you. Enrique, you mentioned earlier a couple of different types of companies. We have a couple of minutes here that would be benefit most from manufacturing in Mexico. Give us some ideas of who would be the optimum type of industry that could benefit from your service in a cross-border relationship.
We have 3 different buckets, if you will, of clients and partners that we deal with. So we have the smaller size accounts that are probably selling anywhere from 20 million to, say, 75 million US dollars in revenue, and they may have 100 to maybe 200 employees on the U.S. side, and they're looking for expansion opportunities. And this is across the board. This could be an aerospace company. This could be a medical device manufacturer. This could be injection molding. I mean, you name it, we've seen it come across our desk. And then the second bucket of clients that we have are the guys that are about 150 million to maybe 300 million in sales revenue. They've got 400 or 500 employees on the U.S. side. And then, of course, we have the guys that are beyond that are half a billion or more in sales. Those are a little bit further and few between. Our bread and butter tends to stay with the guys that are in that 100 million, 150 million to 300 million. Those are the companies that we really thrive on, and they thrive off of us. They're very much keen on their production processes. They probably have had some global exposure or offshore exposure at some point, whether it's with a client base or with a sourcing base. And so those are the types of accounts that we like to focus in on. We also like to focus on accounts that can bring value to the region. And what I mean by that is that our border region has some significant world-class manufacturing companies operating there.
This is true.
Companies like Medtronics, companies like
We've seen them and know them well.
Yeah,
Enrique, we have about a minute, just about a minute left here. When you think about CPI and how important it is to understand that managing that relationship, give us one, how people can contact you if they want to use CPI services. 2, what would you say is the totally unique value proposition for the company in just a short statement? Absolutely. Well, first of all, for communication or contact, just go to our website, www.co-production.net. And one of the things that makes us unique is, one, we are tailor-made. Any relationship that we have is not a cookie-cutter relationship. It fits the model that the client is looking for to the T. Second is we're all about people and opportunities. That is at our core. That's our value. That's perfect. Enrique, our biggest asset. We got to cut it off there. We're out of time. Yep. I appreciate you coming in. I'd like to talk to you again. No. If you'd be happy enough to join us again, we'd love to have you. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a good day. This segment brought to you by our buddies at Infuse and creator of Notify, the CRM of the future. Now coming next, Markets to Watch with David Williams.